All right, the time is now 7 o'clock, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Ms. Pollier?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. Again, welcome everyone to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. I didn't see any additions or corrections to the agenda, so we will move on to the approval of minutes. So we have 3 sets of minutes for approval. I'm going to do these all at one time. Don't think did we have any?
Roll call.
Oh,
Roll
sorry.
call.
Yeah. Clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg.
Here.
Hicks is absent. Mako.
Here.
Shapaka. Here. Suriano. Here. Tamarkin.
Here.
Okay, moving on again. No additions or corrections to the agenda. Next agenda item, approval of minutes. Again, we have 3 sets of minutes. We'll do these all at once. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Last 3 meetings? So seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Greenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Pollier. So I have a motion by Mr. Greenberg and a second, Ms. Pollier. Do I have any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg.
Yes.
Pollier.
Yes.
Mako.
Yes?
Shapaka.
Yes.
Suriano.
Yes.
Tamarkin.
I'm going to abstain because I missed the 12:20 meeting.
Motion passes.
Okay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the swearing in of applicants and speakers. So I'll turn it over to our city attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now at the public hearing portion of the meeting. The public hearing will operate as follows. Administrative staff will make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant or their representative may then make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant has 10 minutes to present, and additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Public comment will then be open for 3 minutes allowed per speaker. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Speakers must complete a speaker slip and come to the podium and state their name and address. The applicant will then be given 10 minutes to comment. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. If there is more than one application pending for a particular address, the presentation on each application may be consolidated and presented as one. At this time, will persons wishing to present testimony this evening please rise and raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, state I do. I do. Thank you.
Okay, next on to applications and public comment. The first application we have is Buckles Court North, Lot 4. Tonight we have 3 items under this agenda item. Now I'll read them into the record. So the first item is a variance V-0001-2024 to consider a variance application to vary chapters 1167.18C1 of the codified ordinance of the city of Gahanna for property located at Buckles Court North, Lot 4, parcel ID 025-013813, current zoning SCPD, medical office building, Larry Canini, applicant. Next, we have a final development plan application, FDP 0001-2024, to consider a final development plan application for property located at Buckles Court North, Lot 4, parcel ID 025-013813, current zoning SCPD, medical office building, Larry Canini, applicant. And then finally, a design review application, DR-0001-2024, to consider a design review application for medical office building, parking, and utilities for property located at Buckles Court North, Lot 4, parcel ID 025-013-773, current zoning SCPD, medical office building, Larry Canini, applicant. I will turn it over to the administration for a presentation. I believe Ms. Kapka will be giving it, so I'll turn it over to you.
This project includes an application for final development plan, design review, and variance for a site located on the west side of Buckles Court North. Here is a zoning map of the area. The site is located approximately underneath the yellow star and is zoned Select Commercial Plan District, which is the same zoning as all adjacent sites. Here is the final plat for 4 properties along Buckles Court North that was approved in 2022. The site in question is outlined in red and is located just south of Reserve B, which is to remain undeveloped, and just north of the Walnut Creek Surgical Suite building. The applicant is requesting approval of final development plan, design review, and variance applications for an approximately 12,000 square foot medical office building at Lot 4 on Buckles Court North. As mentioned, the site is zoned SCPD, which permits medical uses by right. All other lots along Buckles Court that have been developed share similar use. The site is 1.57 acres, and as mentioned, it's located between the Walnut Creek Surgery Suite building and Reserve B. So the building is exactly 11,895 square feet. 52 parking spaces are proposed with the project, which exceeds the 40 required by code. All parking lot landscaping requirements have been met. Most notably, the parking lot, which is located to the front of the building, is screened from the right-of-way with a 3-foot-high shrub. 2,400 square feet of landscaping is provided, which exceeds the 1,200 required by our interior landscaping requirements. Along with that, 13 trees have been provided, which matches the 13 required. And then Chapter 914, which is regulated by parks, requires an additional 41 caliper inches on top of the 13 required trees, and 41 inches have been provided. The building materials are primarily brick and stone, which match exactly the materials used for both Walnut Creek medical buildings. Here is a site plan that was provided by the applicant. As you can see, the primary building is located to the rear of the site with the parking out front. Most notably on this plan, you can see the location of the dumpster, which is highlighted in yellow. This dumpster location does not meet code requirements, and the applicant has requested a variance for this. Here is a landscape plan of the site. Once again, the dumpster location is called out. As you can see, there is landscaping provided around the dumpster in addition to a dumpster enclosure that will match the brick that will be on the primary building. You can also see the parking lot screening that's provided in this plan. Here are elevations of the proposed building. Here you can see the appearance of the brick and stone that will be along the majority of the building. The south and east elevations are the 2 primary facades of the building, and the west and north are the rear. For additional context, here are renderings of the 2 approved Walnut Creek buildings. The top is the surgical suites, which are directly south of Lot 4, and the bottom one is the medical office building, which is directly south of the surgical suite building. So these 2 buildings, along with the one proposed tonight, all match in materials. The applicant has requested 1 variance with this application and is for the location of the dumpster. The zoning code requires that all dumpsters be located to the rear of the main structure. The proposed dumpster is located to the front of the structure in the parking lot, and the applicant states that this location was chosen since no structures can be placed to the rear of the lot due to its topography. Here's the variance criteria, all of which must be met in order to grant approval of a variance. The first is that there are special circumstances or conditions. The second is that the granting of the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of property rights. And the third is that the granting of the variance will not have any negative effects on the area. Here is the final development plan criteria. The plan meets applicable development standards. It's in accord with appropriate plans for the area. It would not have undesirable effects on the area, and it's consistent with land use, character, and development of the area. Here's the design review criteria. Compatibility with existing structures, contributes to the improvement of the design of the district, contributes to the economic and community vitality of the district, and maintains, protects, and enhances physical surroundings. And then since the site is zoned SCPD, it falls within design review districts 3 and 5, which have some additional criteria to be considered with the design review application. Some of the applicable criteria is landscape islands shall be in center and perimeter of the parking areas, earth mounding and trees should be considered, generous use of vegetation is encouraged, and brick, stone, cement, decorative aluminum, and wood are encouraged materials. Staff recommends approval of the variance. Only one variance is requested, and special circumstances exist on the lot due to the topography. Variances to this requirement have been previously approved by Planning Commission, and it is staff's belief that the variance will not have any negative impact on the surrounding area. Staff also recommends approval of the final development plan. All applicable requirements and criteria are met with the variance application. Staff also recommends approval of the design review. Once again, all applicable requirements and criteria are met, and the materials are an exact match to both Walnut Creek buildings and is therefore in character with the surrounding area. And with that, I turn it back over to the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Kapka. We will now open the public comment portion. Would the applicant like to comment? Could you please state your name, address, and your relationship to the project, and if you could speak directly into the microphone, that'd be appreciated.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, thank you. Larry Canini with Canini and Associates. Am I not on there? Again, Larry Canini, Canini and Associates, 122 Andalusia Way, Florida. We are, as you all know, the master developer for the entire Crescent project. And we are at a point now where we continue to get significant interest from medical users now that we have created somewhat of a medical hub there. So this opportunity, or this building, is an opportunity for us to provide somewhat smaller spaces for specific disciplines of medical use and general office, but obviously it's primarily medical there so far, and we project that that will continue. So with the fact that we now have 2 primary care practices within the campus there on Buckles Court North, that's only going to provide us even more disciplines due to the referral basis of primary care. So we just recently moved Optum Health into the building directly across the street from the proposed building here. So that will be the second primary care group in the area. So this, in essence, is an opportunity for us to offer smaller medical practices that maybe don't need 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 feet, folks that might need just 2,500, 4,000, whatever. So this building being just under 12, we have really just kind of designed it as an open palette and are kind of waiting on the users. And we have already secured one user for it, and that is about a 3,500 square foot plastic surgeon. So that will be kind of the beginning of the first tenant, but we will, in essence, allow the rest of the building to be available for whatever needs somebody has. Similar to our other projects there at Crescent, we are also offering the practitioners or the practices the opportunity to have ownership in the building. So as I've told you in many situations in the past with the projects at Buckles Court North, that is really a key element to getting the doctors to not only invest in the community, but being invested in the real estate will keep them here a long time. So that is another aspect of what we are offering with this building. So with that, if you have any questions, happy to answer any that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. I did not see any speakers form, but is there anyone here in the public who'd like to speak on this application?
My kind of meeting.
So seeing none, we will close the public comment portion, and we will open it up to the commission for questions. So I will start on my left-hand side. Mr. Shapaka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the variance application for the dumpster, well, since you don't know the tenant, usually we like the dumpsters on the end of the building just because they get a little dirty and the odor. So the only tenant that you have there now is not anticipating any waste or odorous material that's going to be in front?
No, that situation there, Tom, if you noticed on the plan, if the staff can pull it back up, we have one of the things we've learned over the years, and I'm suffering through it at Beecher, and you're all aware of all the buildings we built there. You know, what we didn't know back then was the need for recycling and the need for so many boxes of medications and supplies that come to these practices. So that dumpster is set up to have, in essence, 3 units, 2 that would be trash, 1 that would be recyclable. And we've done that on the other buildings within Buckles Court. Really, the significant reason to that location is not only related to topography. As you move back on those lots, as you know, we have the reserve behind it with the creek. So, you know, the practices like to be able to have the nice views out of their exam rooms, out of their offices. So as you notice, we've kind of, on that side of the street, pushed the buildings towards the pretty creek and so on. But as we do that, yes, that creates a little bit of a topo issue. Really critically here, the issue was, more importantly, is not having that dumpster truck, and there's 2 of them, one that comes to do the recyclables, one that does the trash. We don't want them circling the parking lot during business hours. And unfortunately, because all the entrances are at the front of the building and the main entrances and the handicapped are, as you can see, up along that northern boundary, we don't like the trucks making that circulation through the parking lot because we've got people in walkers and wheelchairs and so on. So anytime we can keep those trucks, because unfortunately there was a day when we could say we want a 7 a.m. pickup or an after hours pickup, those days are gone because they just don't have the amount of drivers. COVID had a big effect on those services. So anytime we can get that dumpster in the lot and out of the lot quickly, that's really important to us and our patients and our clients. So really a twofold reason for that request for the variance.
So is the, follow-up with that, so the gates themselves,
Yeah.
was there a picture of the material? I mean, is it a solid material?
Again, I apologize in our submission if we failed to do that, but these will be identical to the neighboring property at Surgical Suites, and you can see it in that sketch right there, just right of where it says Walnut Creek Surgical Suites. Those are brick walls with like a metal gate, and it is a louvered gate. So everything is hidden, and as was mentioned in the report, you know, the landscaping, I'll be lucky if people can see the building, to be honest with you, with all the landscaping we're having to do. But in any event, I think, you know, as you can see on the landscape plan, we've got even that heavily landscaped from that standpoint. So it's really not, I don't think, something that's really going to stand out as much as you might all think. And again, it's going to have cars surrounded, or, you know, during the day, there's parking and cars around it. And again, with the medical, we get a lot of waste, so we have to have 2 to 3 pickups a week sometimes, depending on the mix of patients and, or excuse me, the mix of practices. So in essence, that's really the one of the driving forces behind the request.
Thank you, Larry. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Molly?
Yes. I have a couple of questions. My first question, you mentioned that the dumpster would be separated between trash and recyclables. I'm guessing, just for clarification purposes, since it's a medical office, the hazardous materials, where will those be?
That all stays within the building. We do not handle that collection.
Okay.
That is handled by the practices themselves internally within their buildings.
Okay,
So none of that occurs outside. No medical waste leaves the building.
okay, thank you. I guess secondarily, I am curious about the design of the enclosure. Is it going to be completely enclosed, or how will people access the tenants, I guess? How would people access the enclosure where the dumpster is going to be?
So what you have is it's 3-sided with brick. So it's a
Okay.
brick wall to the rear, and then the 2 sides are brick. The front are basically gates that open up, and they are able to be opened manually by someone. So basically, the person bringing the trash out just swings it open and then throws the trash in and then can close it. It's all hinged, in essence.
Okay,
Yeah, and I apologize, we don't have a picture of that.
That's okay.
I don't know if we could do it on Google Map maybe, but it's a pretty standard spec within the industry as well as within city code on how it has to be.
okay. I guess I'm a little bit concerned
just where the proximity of the dumpster is in relation to the buildings, have you thought about, or are you concerned about at all, any unauthorized dumping? And,
That, you know what, that's a consistent problem in our industry anyway.
okay.
So we deal with that regardless, and we put signs up that say, no dumping allowed, private use only, but it happens, But, that's part of our role. We're the property manager as well as the developer, so it's our job to constantly, drive the properties, make sure there's no trash, there's nothing being left out, outside. Actually, with these newer requirements with the gated dumpsters, unlike my Beecher project, for instance, back then, that wasn't a requirement, and we would do pine trees around the dumpsters. But now that's a situation where people can see the dumpster. So on the weekends, we'll see people go there and dumping their lawn care stuff, an old couch, an old chair, because they see it. But when it's enclosed and gated, it kind of doesn't give them the thought to use it because they don't see the dumpster actually sitting there. But unfortunately, in some of our older projects, we run into that.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Greenberg?
Mr. Panini, I want to thank you. I think as long as I've been sitting on the Planning Commission, I don't remember anyone installing recycling container, so that's great. Couple of questions about the dumpster area. Number one, pretty big trucks come in and unload that. Are these 3 different carts that get pushed out on wheels and pulled out?
Actually, no. Actually, if you look at the yellow that is kind of drawn in there, we actually do, from a standpoint of structural components to the slab or to the parking lot, we actually do a heavy-duty concrete pad, and that extends beyond the gates because that truck can only come in so far. But actually, they never get wheeled out.
Okay, so they get the forks and they.
Yep,
pull it.
exactly.
Okay.
And that's with both the recycling and the trash bin. And there could be a situation where once we know our total tenant mix, if we can reduce it to 1 dumpster and 1 recycling bin, we'll do that. But right now, we're prepared for knowing from our experiences when we have multiple tenants in a building, 1 dumpster doesn't get it, usually.
Right. Or they'll have to have more frequent pickups.
Right, and we're able to do that, but that all kind of converts back to a CAM expense to the tenants. So we obviously try to be efficient with the cost, but at the same time, it's really a matter of getting a sense of what our tenants' needs are. Because keep in mind, most medical practices, the cleaning crews come in the evening. After the practices are closed, they come in every night, clean, take the trash out. So they know the drill on how to, put it away and close the gates and all that. We don't have an issue with that. And I'd highly recommend any of you at any time to just take a drive over to Buckles Court now, and you'll see how everything is well-maintained and clean, and it's one of my big sticking
And the
things.
enclosure looks really good.
Yeah,
So-
right. I mean, it
so-
looks as
but-
good as the building.
But the ability for the truck to pull in, back up, that's all been measured out?
Exactly. No, that's all something we work with the trash people, and that's why that location's the best. Because if you look, there's so much area with no cars behind that yellow markings there. He can come in,
Right.
pick it up, back up, and get right back out, and loop right out to the other curb. And that's another thing we did, is we put in 2 driveways. We could have easily just done 1, but for traffic flow and for safety and having that truck be able to come in and out, I just didn't want that truck looping up by the building and going to the back corner of the lot when you've got patients and cars up in there all the time, dropping off patients, picking up patients. It's just not a good mix, not a good mix.
Now, you're going to have 4 tenants?
Well, again, we currently have 1 committed at 3,500 square feet. That leaves us about 8,500. I'd love for 1 8,500 user to come in, but I think we'll probably get at least 2 more.
So each of those potentially will have what EPA calls infectious waste, not
Right,
hazardous waste.
exactly, and that
It's
stays-
infectious waste, and there'll be a different truck coming in for
They
each
have their
one?
own private pickup that comes in, goes inside to their offices,
Right.
picks
But
it
if
up and
there's- If
leaves.
there's 4 tenants, it could be 4 trucks a week, correct?
Depending, I couldn't speak to how many pickups they have. I think it's really a matter of the practice and how much they create in infectious type waste,
Right. Okay, thank you, that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Arno?
And if I may, Mr. Greenberg, keep in mind, for instance, our first tenant that's occupying is a oculoplastic surgeon, so surgeries for the eyes, surgery around the eyes and such. She will be using the surgery center next door. So that's one of the draws to us having this next to the surgical suites, is that they have access to a quick location to do their surgeries.
Thank you. Mr. Serrano?
Yeah. Mr. Kennedy, I just have one question. I know you mentioned that this is going to be very similar material-wise in terms of the brick selection and stone selection to Walnut Creek. It looks to be a third material
Yes.
on the back. Can you just let the commission know what that's going to
Yeah,
be?
well, the back and basically what isn't visible at all, because the building sits so far back from the road and sits actually behind the surgical suites if you were to look at the kind of an aerial view. But the west elevation and a part of the north elevation will be ephes. That'll be a color that'll match in with our kind of stone color that we're using outside, or the stone material on the outside. Ephes is very popular. There's buildings that are all ephes throughout Gahanna, but we were just looking for some cost savings because, again, understand when we do a building at one level, and Michael would understand this, it's expensive. When you go this way versus this way vertically, it's an expensive endeavor. But for us to attract the medical folks, they like their patients to be able to get out of the car and walk right in their door. And that's what made us so successful at Beecher, because we did all those one-story buildings. So we're trying to bring that back, that use and those practitioners to Buckles Court by doing that. So we appreciate the ability to do the ephes in locations where really no one's going to physically see that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Markin?
Mr. Canini, on the south and the east elevation, right now you're showing 7 doors. I assume the final plan will not have, I guess how many doors you put depends on how many tenants you have, certainly.
No,
if
you know
sign
what,
up.
actually, Michael, we will probably leave it as is, because what we find is there are times when a lot of the practices like having multiple entrances. So for instance, a patient entrance and a staff entrance. So we may have a situation where one tenant, if they were to take more than 3,000 feet, they will in essence have the width of 2 main doors as part of their facade, okay? Now, we do have the rear doors on the west and north elevations, but those are due to fire requirements, okay? But actually, the ones on the front, we actually did that to kind of break it up, because again, these elevations, I don't think give you a good sense of how long this building is. You know, it's a bit of an L, so having those extra doors actually helps break up, you know, the mass of brick, and because we did the bump outs with the stone at those doorways, I think it really helps kind of break it up as well.
If you end up in this building with 3, 4, 5 different tenants, are 52 parking spots enough? You know, with their employees and their
Yeah, and
patients?
again, as you know, as was mentioned by staff, code is 40, we're at 52, I believe, is that correct?
Right. Code's 40, you're at 52.
Honestly,
But in your mind, is that
I
appropriate?
I wouldn't expect us to have more than 2 to 3 more tenants tops, a total of 4. Anything beyond that, it won't make sense, because the square footage of those suites will get so small, it becomes obsolete for us as the landlord or a partner to do that. So really, we want to see them around 2,500 to 3,000. So that really only lends us to really go 2 to 3 more tenants max, because our first tenant commitment's already 3,500 feet.
Right.
And keep in mind, too, these patients are not only visiting here, but they may very well be also using the parking lot next door at the surgery center. So, you know, there's kind of a symbiotic relationship between all the buildings. And if you look at MOB1, Walnut Creek MOB1, there's actually a connectivity of sidewalk between parking lots, because the doctors work at both locations, or in this case, potentially a third location, and they're sharing those parking areas.
Will the interconnectivity between the 2 buildings only be out on the street sidewalk? Will there be any in the property?
That's what I'm saying. There's interior connections.
the sidewalk
Yes,
against the
we have
building.
interior connections as well between MOB1 and, you don't see it here,
you don't
but
see it on this.
you do have the sidewalk at the street, but between the big MOB #1, the first one that went up, Walnut Creek Medical Building, we actually have a connecting sidewalk internally between it and the surgical suites. So if we find that some of our doctors in this new building want to have that ease, we'll probably look to do like a path or a, stepping stone path or something.
Not a dirt path through the bushes. Okay. I still have a little concern about the parking, and if you end up with 4 tenants and they all have 3, 4, 5 employees, you're going to take it up. I think one of the things we would not want is, parking on streets or anything like that.
No, we wouldn't allow that. And honestly, with the relationships that I have, that I'm being involved in all these practices and all these buildings, we obviously have a very large parking lot across the street as well. So if push came to shove, we could start to ask the staff to park across the street since they're there all day parking. They're not in and out like the patients would be. We could look to have them park across the street.
Sounds good. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I just have a couple questions. Circling back to the issue that was raised about security there, do you have an on-site security team that monitors the property, or is it just, once a...
We've got the highly qualified Gahanna Police Department that drives up and down Buckles Court.
Okay. Well, I guess I was speaking in terms of a private company that you have, because I
No,
know
we have not had any incidences there, either with car break-ins or anything like that. Now, if that were to happen and we begin to see some issues, then yes, as a group, we would probably look to bring in some private security. But at this point, and again, these are businesses that are 8 to 5. These aren't 2 a.m., 3 a.m. There's no emergency room. There's no 24-hour urgent care here. So it's all just basically patients services. So.
Okay, and my last question is kind of general in nature. So this is lot number 4. Am I correct to see that there's one more lot on this Buckles Court North?
Yeah, there is what would be lot number 3, which is at the end of the new cul-de-sac we just completed. And that one actually has additional, that lot ends up being on the freeway frontage, just like the 2 buildings that one that just got completed and one that's going up now. So that lot is at the end of the cul-de-sac, but fronts on the freeway, on I-270.
Okay.
That area in the middle between the subject tonight and that other lot is a storm basin. That is a pond for stormwater management that captures all of the stormwater needs for the lots along the freeway.
Thank you.
Mr.
Greenberg?
Yeah, I have one more question. The reserve, I was looking at the drawing, and
Still have it there.
yeah, and the sidewalk goes obviously in front of your building. There's a little smidge in front of the reserve area. Who's responsible for building the sidewalk?
That will go in as the lot number 1 on the corner is currently under construction. There's steel going up right now. That's Ohio Gastro. That's their new facility, and they will be required to connect that. We've got that in their contract.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, may I ask one additional question, please?
Certainly.
You mentioned earlier in your talk about the tenants, excuse me, giving tenants an ownership interest.
No, yes, giving the doctors an ownership interest in the real
Doctors
estate in the
in the
building.
real estate, are
Instead
you-
of just being a tenant and paying rent, we allow them to be a partner with us in the building.
So it's like a joint venture?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, we find that, again, it's good for the community, it's good for us, because unfortunately, and this is a location, as you may all remember, that has 80% 10-year tax abatement. What tends to happen is that tax abatement begins to expire in year 8, 9, and 10. That doctor or that business starts to look elsewhere. And I'm sure Shannon can speak to that as well. So the goal is to keep them invested in the project and not looking elsewhere to leave after 10 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, what we're going to do, we're going to go into the voting pattern here. So I'm going to break down each 3 of these items separately. So do we have a motion for item number V-0001-2024?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to approve the variance application number V-001-2024.
Thank you, Mr. Chipaka. Do we have a second?
Second, Suriano.
Seconded by Mr. Suriano. Do we have any discussions on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to say that I think Larry's addressed all the concerns for the variance application, and I'm in favor of it.
I'll also be in favor of the variance, given the site conditions and some of the accommodations that Mr. Canini's making relative to site flow and access.
Mr. Chair, I will also be in favor of this. I will say, I don't love the idea of a dumpster in the middle of the parking lot. There is a picture of the enclosure on one of the attachments that we received, which looks very professionally done, very tightly controlled. So I will be in approval of it, but again, I don't think it's certainly ideal for future developments if there's an alternative.
Okay, thank you. Clerk, call the roll.
Shataka,
Yes.
Suriano,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Mako.
Yes. Motion passes. So next, do I have a motion to approve item FDP-0001-2024?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the final development plan application number FDP-0001-2024.
Thank you, Mr. Packard. Do I have a second?
Second, Suriano.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. Any discussion?
Just one thing. I'm a little bit concerned too about the parking situation. Just not having enough parking spaces, depending on how many tenants occupy the property. So I am a little bit concerned about that, but I think that the development plan is well thought out, and I think that it seems like from what was described to us tonight, that it seems like there's some contingencies in place for that, so I would be in favor of it.
Any other discussion?
I'm in favor of the final development plan, just a, commentary relative to some of the staff comments on meeting code. Typically, office buildings, parking is accommodated through square footage and not necessarily through use. So if it were retail, it would be something different, but given that it's office and there is an overage of current parking compared to what's required, I'm in favor.
Seeing no other discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Shataka,
Yes.
Suriano,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Mako.
Yes. Motion passes. And then finally, do I have a motion to approve item DR-0001-2024?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the trifecta here on the design review application number DR-0001-2024.
Thank you, Mr. Shapak. Do I have a second?
Second, Suriano.
Thank you, Mr. Suriano. Any discussion?
I'll be in favor of design review, given it's consistent with surrounding buildings.
Seeing no other discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Shataka,
Yes.
Suriano,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Mako.
Yes. Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commission. And if I may make one other comment with the concerns on parking. Hopefully, one of the goals with the mixed use of the apartments we'll be starting here very soon is that we will have nurses and staff and folks that will not need a car to go to work, and they can walk over to their respective jobs. So thank you again. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Larry.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the zoning code. I'll read this into the record. So we have item CC-0001-2024 to recommend approval to council for the repeal and replacement of Part 11, Planning and Zoning Code of the codified ordinances of the city of Gahanna. And I'll turn it over to the administration for a presentation. Is that Mr. Blackford?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Michael Blackford, Director of Planning, here before you tonight This night's been a long time in the making. This has been a project, a zoning code rewrite, that's been around for 3 or 4 years now. So very excited to be before you all tonight, and I wouldn't be here tonight without the hard work of a couple of folks to my left here. So I want to give a big appreciation and thanks to Maddie Kapka and Logan Stang for all their hard work on this project, because without their hard work, I can guarantee you it would have been a couple more years before this would be before you, and it would not be as a complete document that I think that it is. So tonight, I want to take just a real quick step back to kind of say, as a kind of a refresher of, why are we here, what's this project about, and then go in and hit some of the highlights here. So again, sort of the what, why, and how of this project, what this project is. It's a zoning code rewrite. So that's Chapter 11. Our codified ordinances. There's a lot of other chapters. Chapter 13 is building. I think Chapter 7 is business regulations. We're not making amendments to that. This is only to Chapter 11, the zoning code, and this is a brand new document, so it's not a red line. If you were to look at the document and you looked at, say, Chapter 1105 and compared that new and old, none of it's going to line up in that. So again, this is a brand new document. I'll go into a little bit of a deeper dive on sort of the whys, the challenges and successes, but essentially, the feedback that we consistently hear on our zoning code is that it's very burdensome. It's not formatted in a logical way, and so it's very difficult to have folks read something. If you print this document out, it's 397 pages. You're not going to get somebody from the public to read a 397-page document to find what they want. So we really had to format the document, really cut out some of the extra information that really wasn't necessary, and just get to the meat of what people want and are looking for. The other item is really some of those challenges, again, is it reflective of the community's vision? And the zoning code was originally written in 1958. And after 65 years, it might not be as relevant as it once was. At that point in time, Gahanna's population was less than 3,000 folks, and it was growing. And the needs of a community when it's beginning its life cycle is very different than 65 years later, when it's sort of peaked or come close to that peak with population and that, and we're really focusing on infill development. The development constraints and what we're trying to achieve are very different. With that said, I definitely don't want to disparage the code too much, because there's a lot of good things with the code as well. A lot of things are working, and the last thing I ever want to do is change anything that's working well. And a lot of our standards, a lot of them were working quite well, and some weren't. So again, we weren't making an effort to change things. There wasn't any feedback or push to change. And our process for the most part isn't changing as well. So there's a lot of things in our existing code that we try to carry forward to this code as well. So I said I'd do a little deeper dive on the challenges, and I'll maybe show some images here shortly. But again, I think the main thing that we hear and have experienced from internal customers, external customers, is just trying to find information. And one of the issues that we found was that our code might have parking references in 4 different places, and people aren't going to look in 4 different places in that. So again, there's in terminology, our code uses words like syndicate and sundries, and in 20 years, I've never had anyone ask to do a new syndicate or a sundry. So coming up with terminology that was more reflective of today's vernacular and what those demands are was a big part of that, although it is disappointing that I may never, in my professional life, have to deal with a syndicate. Process improvement. We've been doing this for years. We take code changes usually 2 or 3 times a year before you all. A lot of it's trying to make changes that we've identified. A lot of those have to do with process, especially with variances and that. So again, eliminate some of those reoccurring variances when they're routinely approved. We've been working on that throughout the years, and this document hopefully takes that to the next step. Next level. What's administrative and what's public hearing with our public, our process? We've talked about that a lot. We've made a few changes over the year. We've made subdivision without plats an administrative item. This code, we talked about de minimis variances. Again, I think what we've been doing over the years and with our stakeholder and public engagement is getting, we have a pretty good idea nowadays of what are those issues that should go to hearing and what shouldn't. So again, this process is taking it to the next level with getting more in line with that. This next one, need more architectural design standards. This was like day one. This has been talked about in various land use plans that we used to have. Go Forward, Gahanna, all of our outreach. It's always been fairly consistent that we need something more than what we have. And hopefully this code gets us in that direction. In uses, really haven't had a whole lot of issues with uses, but sometimes just one is too many. And so again, in 1958, uses and where those uses were going, is very different than they are today. So we really took a step back. We had a lot of engagement with the public on what's appropriate and where, and we've made some changes, some minor changes, I would say, but we'll cover that here momentarily. And what's worked with our zoning code. Again, we don't want to change what's working. I know I talked about process changing, but again, the majority of our processes are working. So the majority of applications and kind of issues that Planning Commission sees today, they'll continue to see those in the future with a couple of exceptions. One, de minimis variance, we talked about that previously. Again, those are very few and far between, but at our last meeting in December, we did have a 6-inch variance, so that would stop somebody from needing to come and get approval for a 6-inch variance. A preliminary plat, that was our one preliminary application and never seemed to have any value to anyone, so eliminating that step. And then our final development plan design review, that might seem like a big one up here that we're changing that process. That's really the core function of what this group does. But we're combining those two applications because the information that's required on them is essentially almost the same. And if you look at a lot of your applications, they end up being almost the same material. So combining those. And again, I just touched on uses. We needed to refine where uses are located, but we really didn't need to make radical changes, and that wasn't just made in a vacuum. There was a lot of engagement, and we'll talk about that here shortly. So how did we come to this? Well, just kind of alluded to it. We had engagement with the community, and that was in person. It was online. I believe we had 2 online engagements, and we were in person. I think the most successful community engagement I've ever been a part of or ever heard of related to a planning item, I would say, was for our zoning code at the flea market on Mill Street in the fall. Logan, Maddie, and I were there for pretty much the whole day, and it wasn't, we had a break. We didn't have a break of not having people talking to us until like the last 45 minutes of the event. Easily was 200-300 folks, which would be 10, 20 times as many folks if it was in here during our regular hours. And so we got a lot of good feedback from those various engagements. We also met with our seniors. We met with our business community. Again, we had online engagement. We've also, had discussion items with our stakeholders, which Planning Commission, City Council. We had our workshop in October. Throughout the years, I've taken a number of items related to this. So again, it's not just one person sitting making decisions. Our land use plan, that influences the zoning code tremendously. That's one of the main purposes of a land use plan, is to make recommendations for zoning. And not all those recommendations get implemented because a lot of them might be a little too aspirational and not quite appropriate and that. So it's kind of balancing out some of those recommendations from the land use plan. Like one of them may have been mixed use in our land use plan may have said like per acre we need to have, I think it was like 200,000 square feet of use per acre. So that's going to require multiple stories. That's not really what our vision is for the city, I don't think. So it's not like we're taking everything from the land use plan, but there certainly was a number of things related to design and landscaping, signage, lighting, things of that nature that got incorporated into the plan. And obviously, I forgot, I want to thank our consultant. Our consultant obviously worked tremendously hard on this project. They really helped us in areas where maybe day-to-day staff were not really quite in tune with some of these things as maybe they are, whether it's legal or national trends, some of those best practices, and a lot more. So, they obviously influenced and more than influenced, participated and wrote the document with us. So, again. So when I talk about formatting and ease of use and simplicity, I'm going to put up a photo here, an image. This doesn't obviously display well. You don't need to really read the words anyways, but this is a little snapshot of our current existing code when you're trying to go to a residential district and figure out what your setbacks are. This is what it looks like, and it doesn't all fit on one screen. It's too many pages to fit there. But this is what our proposed code would be. It's a nice chart where you can find everything right there. This simplifies things tremendously, and it puts the information in a form that people who don't do this every day, they'll understand more easily. And that's, again, when the external customers have an easier day, internal customers do. So this is a win-win. That's really what we're trying to accomplish with this rewrite. This image on the left, this is our current code. Again, it doesn't display really well because it's so large, but this is just a portion of one zoning where if you're trying to locate the uses. And this is a little snapshot of what our code is now. So we have a table that has all the uses and for all the zone districts, which accounts for, I believe, 3 pages in our proposed code. If you look at our current code, it's scattered throughout the 397 pages, and it takes up 44 pages. So again, when we talk about formatting, trying to make things easier of use, here's some specific examples of that. In architecture and design, these are some quotes from our code for some of our zone districts. Universal harmony, high quality materials, harmonious relationship. If you want to have nothing will bring to light the need to refine this than meeting with, say, like a trade contractor where, they're family-run business and they're trying to build a new project and they're looking for guidance. It's very difficult for staff to provide guidance to folks, especially for folks maybe who don't live this every day, when a lot of our zone districts just have sort of nebulous statements like universal harmony. That's very difficult to achieve between building colors. So our proposed code goes away from sort of very subjective things like that nature, and we're going into specific permitted and prohibited materials, giving more guidance than quality materials. Here are the things that we've identified as, preferred materials. It's stone, masonry, things of that nature. Standards should differ, varying on location. In Old Gahanna, they're more stringent than, say, in our industrial area. Oddly enough, our current code in our industrial area has perhaps our most stringent standards. So, we're trying to catch up and right-size some of these. Limited number of colors. I think our code says 4. Some of us may have wanted it to say 3, but it says 4. We actually have a requirement for windows, breaks in the facade, things of that nature. Trying to have some level of consistency in materials and things of that nature. What we don't do and didn't do, and this is part of all the different engagements, is we don't prescribe a specific architectural style. So you won't see Georgian architecture, Art Moderne in there, in that, because that was some of the feedback that was consistently received, whether it was 2015, 2016 with Go for Gahanna, or 2023. We don't want to prescribe architecture, but we need more consistency. And so here are some specific examples of how we're trying to achieve that. Uses. I know sometimes we'll get a development proposal, uses come to the forefront. For the vast majority of Gahanna, when we looked at, where the city is, where it wants to go, what some of the issues are, it really isn't a lot of change with uses. First and foremost. And that was a lot of I think the feedback that we got with the engagement at Mill Street, where we met with hundreds of folks from the public. It was almost all positive comments, and I think a lot of it was just, is this going to, is my area changing? And the short answer is no. If it's residential, it's going to stay residential. I mean, Gahanna's already has an established development pattern. There wasn't any need identified by anyone to, sort of change that around. So our residential areas are going to stay residential. I'd say the major change was, probably with our neighborhood commercial zoning. That's a zoning that we've seen had some feedback about maybe uses being too wide-ranging, and we needed to refine that scope down. So, that was one of the things that we changed, and we'll get into that here a little bit. Another big change was, and this is a real big change, and this goes into some of the national trends that were talked about, but more residential opportunities in commercial areas, and I'll touch on that a little bit later on. So again, biggest change though, if you were to look at our zoning map, which we will, consolidation of districts, we're going from 26 down to 13. Again, permitted uses in neighborhood commercial. There was very little difference in our commercial districts as far as uses. So it was trying to have a little bit more of a difference and being mindful of maybe some of those commercial uses that would be not appropriate anymore in neighborhood commercial area. And we had a lot of feedback that maybe uses that were 24/7, later in the day, nighttime uses, those weren't appropriate in and around neighborhoods, which makes a lot of sense. So that was a relatively easy change to make. And again, residential would be permitted in our commercial general zone district by a conditional use. Again, that kind of follows a lot of national trends. And I think we talked about that previously, but I know we talked about 26 different districts in our current map. Very little difference, so it was kind of easy to consolidate some of those. For example, here's one on the screen. We have CC is community commercial, CC2 is community commercial modified. They allow the exact same uses and the same standards. The only difference is one of them says you have to file a final development plan and you have to have curb cuts, where the city engineer says that applies to all developments. So, there's very little differences in some of these. We have 2 zone districts that there's no properties that have that zoning, and we have a few more where there's only 2 or 3 properties. So again, we have a lot of zone districts and not a lot of properties that have that. So again, we consolidated that. In our proposed map, we're down to 13, 6 residential, 6 non-residential, 1 mixed use. So what does that look like? On our left is a little portion of our zoning map. Right here on the left-hand side of the screen, that's 270. We got 670, so we've got coming into town here, Agler Road, left to right, Stigler Road. So we just want to kind of show you where we're at in the city. Now, the colors are going to be totally different. And it might look like we have the same amount of colors. So going from 26 districts to 13 really doesn't declutter our zoning map at all. But what I would like to show, this is actually light green. It looks a little pale yellow green here. This is all residential. What you should see are blocks of colors that stay consistent. So where it's this light green, now it's yellow. Where it was dark green, now that area is brown. So again, residential areas are staying residential. Probably the biggest change is, and this map shows it a little bit here, is, and what I want to point out to you is when we were very mindful of some of the challenges and feedback that we heard from the community. So it was being very strategic on which commercial properties were to receive an office zoning, or really a neighborhood commercial or a general commercial zoning. General commercial is going to allow for more uses and that. So what are the appropriate uses? What are those appropriate areas? And the dark red there, brick red, that is the commercial general area. So that's where we're going to allow more intense uses. The pink area, that's right across the street, that's the neighborhood commercial. So what we try to do is locate general commercial in areas that were at major intersections and on major roads. Neighborhood commercial is primarily found adjacent to residential subdivisions and that. So again, we're trying to be a little bit more mindful because neighborhood commercial allows for less intense uses, so it should be less impacts to our commercial or our residential areas. Some other changes that we made, we have some green initiatives in our code. We have language about EV chargers, green roofs, solar panels, I think as well. We have language about ADUs, which is accessory dwelling units. That was added as a conditional use in our single-family districts. That was an attempt to, our part of addressing the housing crisis that's been identified, again, nationally and regionally. City of Columbus talks about it quite a bit. Again, what's appropriate in Gahanna, accessory dwelling units, it would be by conditional use, so it wouldn't be a staff decision. there's limitations on size, the number of units is just one. It's got to be accessory, 1,000 square feet. So there's some, safeguards and parameters in there, but again, that would be a planning commission decision. We made some changes to temporary signage. I know that's something we've talked about a little bit. What those changes are actually, weren't all that much because, again, we've talked about it with you all, community. It's very tricky when you're dealing with signage and things like that. So really, it's pretty much the same standards, but we're pretty happy because we simplified it quite a bit. It was a very confusing section of code, maybe our most confusing, just the way it was written and the way there was a lot of different triggers, and it was very confusing. So we simplified it, and that's a change from what you saw previously to today. But again, it's really same, for the most part, same size of signs, duration, that really hasn't changed all that much. Again, administrative approvals, that was part of our discussion. We talked about final development plans and design reviews in the past, and it was like we've had years where there was a lot of small additions, and it's kind of like, why are we seeing these things? So we put that in the code. We've talked about it before, but at a high level, it was like parking lot modifications, site lighting, minor additions, repainting, something in an existing color, something of that nature. Those would now be administrative, and they wouldn't require the planning commission approval. Again, those have to meet code. So they don't meet code, it's going to come before you guys because that would be a variance. So we discussed several things, and we didn't implement all of them. Green infrastructure, that was talked about quite a bit, especially at our workshop. And, that's related to zoning, but our consultant was really talking about that's really not, maybe the most appropriate place in zoning code because a lot of those are more infrastructure related. So we do have some green initiatives. They're relatively limited, but really probably be other places where that would be more appropriate to be in code than Chapter 11. Short-term rentals was discussed quite a bit, especially at the workshop. Our consultant talked about that, and it might be related to zoning, but it's not a zoning matter, and probably more appropriate if we want to, have some rules on short-term rentals that be located somewhere other than the zoning code. Talked about housing trends. Housing trends, I think City Council had Morpsey and the Kerwin Institute come and speak. Our consultant has spoken about national housing trends. It's talked about a lot in publications. I know Columbus has talked a lot. A lot of those housing trends, it's removing barriers to housing. And the main thing is through zoning. And what those national recommendations are is that it shouldn't require rezoning to go and allow multifamily or single family. And you should allow a lot more housing than single family. You should be allowing it everywhere. Now, not all those things are, and instead of maximum densities, minimum densities, small or no lot sizes, tiny homes, there's a lot of different things that they're encouraging. Most of that really isn't appropriate in Gahanna. Again, we've talked about those things and how we addressed the housing was really through accessory dwelling units, and by perhaps allowing resident multifamily in our commercial areas. And again, it's our more intense commercial areas, our commercial general areas, through a conditional use. No minimum parking requirements. I know that was just talked about. I may have had high hopes 2 years ago, but that didn't go through, and understandably so. So I'd like to talk about expectations a little bit about what we can and shouldn't expect with a new zoning code. There should be fewer planning commission applications for a couple of reasons. The main reason is going to be is that we combine final development plan and design review, so that now it goes from two applications down to one. But a lot of it's going to be our variances, because again, we have de minimis. We've kind of made some of these changes recently last year with setbacks and things like that to try to reduce the amount of residential variances. I know we've kind of cleaned up some of our landscape language and that to make it a little bit easier for folks to meet code and not need variances. So, we should see slightly fewer planning commission applications. Again, a lot of these benefits are a little bit more subtle because it really has to do with the flow and formatting and ease of use of the document. So not all of it's going to be a lot easier for, say, Maddie and Logan and I to understand those benefits, but a lot of that doesn't trickle up to planning commission or city council. what we shouldn't expect is probably maybe more important, and this comes up a lot, and this came up a lot in, I think, my interactions with folks when we engaged the public down on Mill Street. Maybe there was an application or two that was in the news recently, and so they were talking about, why don't you just say no and that don't allow them, and we can't do that. Whether it's this code or any other zoning code, there's obviously property rights, there's due process. So we can tell somebody that, hey, we don't think this is a great idea, here's why. Not consistent with our land use plan, not consistent with, how previous these kind of things have gone to hearing, but they have every right to submit and go forward. So, we're not going to stop development. They have the right to make that request. And this is a good, what we won't see is you're not going to, if you're a member from the public, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden see a Walmart outside your window. Because again, we're not changing where our commercial areas are. We're really not changing where our residential areas are. So you shouldn't see a radical change in really where uses, our activities are happening. Obviously, we're very established. It would be probably really surprising if I said something different. And I want to temper expectations. We get this with land use plans sometimes. I would just say with the zoning code, don't expect to wake up tomorrow and see the rapid change that we want to see. We're not going to see a bunch of buildings with meeting the new design. We don't have sunset provisions like maybe some zoning codes do for some types of things, which says, hey, you got to comply with this new sign regulation by this date. We don't have that kind of language, so you're not going to wake up and all of a sudden see different types of signage or different types of building design. When folks come in, just like we had earlier in the evening, that's when we would see some of those things in effect. So we've discussed this quite a few times here recently. I think the last time it was on our agenda was our last meeting in December. We did have some public comment on schools, and it was specific to some properties that are in our current code, office, commerce, and technology zone. I mean, some of our office areas in and around the Tech Center Drive portion of town, where office areas we're looking at reuse. And I know we had this provision or change last year, talked about it, and the recommendation from Planning Commission was to propose some language. So we did add secondary schools as a conditional use within the IM, which is Innovative Manufacturing Zone District, which is basically the new word for office, commerce, technology, a new abbreviation there. What we did is we added language in the code that tied it to a specific geographic area. So it has to be east of 270. It has to have frontage on Tech Center or Morrison. So there are some location requirements which should address the issue of it maybe expanding into more industrial areas in that part of town. We also had proposed language that says, you have to provide us a site plan that really addresses parking, traffic circulation, provide us specific details of what, like your hours of operation, how you're getting folks in and out of the school, what's your enrollment, some of those things that I think that were identified previously as areas of concern. So hopefully that proposed language, addresses some of those concerns. Again, the proposed change, it's not for it to be an administrative approval. It would require conditional use. So Planning Commission would get the opportunity to see that and evaluate it for appropriateness. Temporary signs, I know I kind of briefly covered that. Again, we had that missing from our section as we were trying to, our previous code, as we were trying to refine that, and there really isn't a significant amount of changes proposed. It's really just a simplification of how we do that. And a lot of the challenge was that it was based on materials and things of that, and signs are pretty much just a couple of materials. So getting away from identifying only a few specific materials, we do have like prohibited materials, so signs don't disintegrate and things of that. But if it requires a temporary sign permit today, it will in the future. We're not changing the permitting requirements. That's a application process that doesn't require a fee. We're not proposing any fees or anything like that. So again, it should actually simplify the temporary sign process a little bit. We do need a little bit of direction. Every time we look at this code, we'll always find things that might need to get tweaked and all that. So, obviously, we got to push this forward. never be 100%, but we'll take code changes to you, later this year. But we did find a couple of things that we maybe questioned a little bit and wanted to get feedback. If everything goes well tonight and you all vote to recommend approval of this, then there would be a few minor changes to the document. One, we added the de minimis variance. We were talking about it, I think, last week, and actually we had a little bit of concern. It talks about numerical standards, and I think that needs to be refined. So I just want to let you know we want to refine that because we don't want someone to think that that could apply to density. So if your density is 20, we don't want somebody saying, well, I'm going to qualify for a de minimis variance of 22. So really, I think when we were talking about this, it really is, not for certain things, but more for maybe like setbacks and lot coverage types of numerical things. So we just want to clarify that a little bit. We noticed something that we weren't comfortable with, and we want to make a change, but we want to run it by you all. So neighborhood commercial uses, again, this is the zoning that pretty much anywhere on the new zoning map that's going to have neighborhood commercial, it's going to be adjacent to residential development, probably a subdivision of some type. The code, to our surprise, says that hotels would be a permitted use in neighborhood commercial. Not a conditional use, but a permitted use. I don't feel comfortable with that being a permitted or a conditional use. I was quite surprised. So I think staff agreed in that. So again, we would propose to change that. So now hotels, motels was no longer an allowed use in neighborhood commercial. And wanted feedback to see if you all agreed. Had other feedback in agreement, but again, since this would be a change that we couldn't get to you before tonight, wanted some direction there. And we did have a member of the public, Mr. Liskay is here. He did provide an email suggesting some code language to I'm calling it traffic circulation signage, and what you would see within some of our larger developments, like maybe Stone Ridge or something of that nature. I did have an opportunity to discuss this with our city engineer. He was our director of engineering. He was on board with those changes, so we'd be happy to amend that section of code and add a sentence or two to address that. So again, those are some changes. Love to, if anyone has any objection to changing motels or hotels to a no longer being permitted. And it's not permitted in our current code either. So, it's just, we were surprised to see that in there when we were doing our 20th check on some of these things. So we would make that change. And with that, I really don't have anything else for you all tonight, other than great appreciation for all your efforts and time and bearing with us while we were getting this ready for you all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackford. So we'll open this up to the public comment. See, we had 2 speaker slips submitted tonight. So the first speaker slip will Mr. Tom Liskay. Please step up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's Tom Liskay. I live at...
Could you, again, state your name, address, and again, just...
I just started. Yes. My name's Tom Liskay. I live at 457 Tresham Road here in Gahanna. Been there since 1987. I think the code as rewritten is very readable. I thank the staff and the commission and consultants that were involved. For someone like me who's not a professional or anything, it's very readable, and I really appreciate it. The only suggestion I have is one that I've encountered several times on traffic signage within traffic circulating, especially up there at Stone Ridge. That was built about, 28 years ago or so? And they have these real fancy wooden stop signs. It must have cost them a mint. They've since fallen over at least once, and they replaced them with more fancy stop signs that are wooden. And it's very difficult to see at night, especially if it's raining. There is a little bit of a sign underneath that says 4-way stop. That is reflectorized, and you can see that well. So what I'm suggesting is that we add to the code that any internal signage in parking lots, traffic circulations that direct a stop, yield, one way, or do not enter meet the standards of the manual and uniform traffic control devices for streets and highways. And like a stop sign would be cheaper, a metal stop sign with the reflectorized overlay, I'm sure would be cheaper than paying someone to make those fancy stop signs that they have there. So, something like traffic signs to control internal traffic circulation, directing stop, yield, one-way, and do not enter need to meet the requirements of the most recent manual and uniform traffic control devices for streets and highways regarding size, reflectivity, and posting. And I don't know if this is possible in the zoning code, but it would be great if you gave non-conforming uses because of public safety, maybe 2 years to change them out. Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker slip that's been submitted, Charlie Adams.
Hi, good evening. Charlie Adams. I reside at 2501 Fair Avenue, Columbus, Ohio. Here on behalf of the Daimler Group, and it's good to see many of you again. I was here in December at a past meeting. I was the speaker that Mr. Blackford mentioned regarding the, at the time, was advocating for an overlay in the OCT, now IM district, or proposed IM district, and really just wanted to express our support for this proposed overlay. Appreciate all of your thoughtfulness and consideration for bringing this a potential application for this conditional use. Completely understand that there would be concerns about bringing a potential school user into this market. We as the owner, developer of this project, we're going to be trying everything across the board, and we really just wanted to voice our support and appreciate your consideration for, as I mentioned last time, giving us that little bit more flexibility for this adaptive reuse as the office market and the world at large continues to change. So just wanted to say thank you and really appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any questions, if I may? No?
All right, thank you, Mr. Adams. Would the administration like to respond to any of the public comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Like the speakers said, I appreciate it. Mr. Liskey providing that ahead of time. That gave me an opportunity to talk to our city, or again, our director of engineering. So if that's a change, staff wouldn't have any objection to that. Again, I know we also talked a couple times about the conditional use for secondary schools. If there's any feedback, any concerns with the proposed language, staff would be more than happy to make some adjustments. But staff would be in favor of those changes. We don't have any objections to them. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, so we will close the public comment, and we will open it up to the commissions for any questions. So starting on my left, Mr. Shapaka.
Good comment.
Ms. Pollier.
Just a couple questions to ask. I did try to read all 208 pages of this, but obviously your knowledge of this is much greater than my knowledge of this. But I first want to thank you all for taking the time and effort that was obviously put into this. I've looked at a lot of zoning codes in my line of work, and I don't know that I've ever seen one that has these graphics in there and charts and things like that, and I think it's a lot more user-friendly than a lot of other zoning codes that I've seen in other cities, so thank you for doing that. I have a question about the short-term rentals. You mentioned that those should be more administrative, and they should belong in another. They shouldn't belong in the zoning code. I guess my question is where do you think those should belong?
So, that's a great question. So it's in Chapter 7. I forget what that section's titled, but we have rental registration code. And I apologize. I'm sure I misspoke too many times tonight, but not that it would be administrative, but it would be in a different section of code. So yes, that was brought up, and our consultant thought the same. that again, especially since the city already has a rental registration and short-term rentals, if we're talking like Airbnbs and things of that nature, we already have code in place. We already have a registration process and parameters, and so that would be a revision to Chapter 778. Wow, it's a lot of 780 is the chapter. That seems like a lot. So it'd be a revision to that. Typically, zoning codes don't really get into ownership and that. It's really unit type. So typically, zoning codes stay away from rental, not rental, things of that nature, and it's really, either a single unit or a double unit or, a multifamily unit building. And how the ownership is, that's not something zoning usually gets involved in.
So more of a, excuse me, more of a licensing issue than.
It definitely could be. That would be one approach, and I think there might be, that might be an avenue we want to proceed as a city. I know the good thing is in that it's the zoning department, or zoning division, so part of the planning department that enforces and implements the existing rental code. So it'd be relatively easy for us to add sort of another layer on top of that registration process for the short-term rental specifically. We could handle that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
My other question is about the ADUs. Was that, and I didn't have a chance to go back and reference the original code to see what the differences were, but could you just kind of summarize what the changes are with regard to that specifically?
There is no language in the current code on accessory dwelling units.
Okay.
It doesn't use that term. There might be something somewhat similar in our code with, I don't know. Maddie, don't we have something with? I'll keep it short to what we don't have any accessory dwelling unit language currently, and I know that was something that was talked about a few different engagements, and then so yes, we created an accessory dwelling unit component. It's allowed, I believe, in proposed to be allowed in 4 zoning districts. They're all single-family zone districts. It would require conditional use, so it would not be administrative, it would be planning commission.
Right.
There's restrictions on the number, I think 1, sounds appropriate. I believe, is there anything with who can be there? Or no, we didn't do that because we can't
That
really
was going to be
verify
my next
that.
question, if there was anything that you had contemplated in any of your research or conversations about who exactly can be there.
Yeah, if I recall, we discussed that, and I think the challenge is that you can't really verify and monitor is hard. So at one point in time, someone could come in and say, yep, it's for family members only. But how you prove some of those things and then how you regulate it after the fact, it's a losing battle. You can't really do that. So we try to avoid language like that when possible. And I think with ADUs, I don't know what the split is, but I know I've seen them both ways where it's limited to certain family members, and other times it is not. I think the more recent codes are all going towards having less and less restrictions. So again, I don't think that's appropriate in Gahanna, so we were trying to have restrictions that we felt were appropriate in that area. So not limiting to the family members, but limiting to size, 1,000 square feet, I think is what we say.
I guess my concern would be the transient nature of that. If it's not limited, I wouldn't want to see it turn into like a rental situation. I guess that would be my concern, like either not necessarily a short-term rental situation, but where somebody would essentially like lease that portion of the property.
That's probably how it's going to be. That's what they're used for, primarily.
As opposed to like a family member or.
Correct, like a granny flat or
yeah,
something like that.
I guess that's kind of what I envisioned when
Yeah.
I thought of that, but okay.
Yeah, this would be the more, wide. Now, if the good thing is, it might not be ideal in all situations, but because it's a conditional use, conditional uses can be conditioned. And so there can be conditions added on to something of that nature. So there might be another way to get to that when it's really.
If it's an issue.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I'm done, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Greenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Blackford, I have a couple questions. First, I didn't know what an ADU was until I watched the Property Brothers and figured it out. I wanted to talk about the traffic flow. Who is responsible for putting the stop signs and, you know, if you're talking about Stone Ridge and circulation, right now, who handles that?
I believe it's the developer. I'm not sure. That's part of the process that we're not heavily involved in, so I'm a little bit more unfamiliar with.
Right, so that, you know, where stop signs go and is not going to come to us.
Correct. There's, I would say it would be better if it was located in Chapter 9 where there's engineering standards, but I believe there's already, and I think the language that was brought up was existing code language that got carried forward. So I don't think this is new, it would just be clarifying what it is. Yeah, ideally, it would probably be located in a different chapter, and that could be done. This could be a nice intermediate kind of step by adding this. There might be, you know, at some future point in time, a rewrite of additional chapters, and then you would probably see there's still several other things in zoning code that really aren't traditional zoning, and those might get moved to a different chapter. But yeah, no objections, you know, to adding it at this point in time.
On de minimis, I love the de minimis. And I thought you had a 10%.
10% is in there. When we were looking at it, and I forget why we were looking at it, but it says of like a numerical standard. And the one thing I would never want, one of the most, pretty much in any community you go to, density is, you know, one of the most important factors, and that's a numerical standard. So it never crossed my mind that it would apply to density, but the density is numerical, and so that's why we always look at things and we try to think about it in different lights, and we try to anticipate some of those things. So again, I think we want to clarify that it's really setbacks, you know, maybe a little bit of lot coverage or something like that. There might be a couple other things. So I think we're going to refine that to more clearly articulate what dimensional standard, or sorry, numerical standards those are.
Great. I took a look at the entire code today. Didn't get through the whole thing, but I did see that there is, when needed, an environmental plan. And when does that come into play?
That honestly, I won't be able to answer because we did not change really anything in the cell tower code, because that is very specific to a certain group of people. And the last time that was modified was 2020, I believe. So that's relatively new code. And we haven't had, I don't think we've had a new tower. Maybe we have had one since that code was implemented. So I'm going to have to say that I'm ignorant on what that environmental plan
So that
is.
just sits on the tower code, part of the code, nowhere else.
As far as I'm aware.
Okay. Two more. One is, I noticed that our comments were taken into consideration and adjustments were made in this revision, so I appreciate that.
Of course.
And finally, is how long will it be once we move it forward to council, and when does it take effect?
Great question. So if it's recommended for approval tonight, I believe it'll be scheduled for the next committee meeting, which I want to say off the top of my head was like February 12th-ish, that time period. That would be a committee meeting. It needs to have a first reading, and then there's a second reading public hearing. And I believe the charter says when it's like zoning code, there's a minimum of 30 days between when planning commission sees it and when council can take action on that. So we're probably looking at, I believe that would be like March 3rd or 4th, again, if everything moves, you know, as fast as humanly possible, which means then it would be 30 days after it gets adopted for when that would take effect. And so any applications we have in review now or that we get in the next couple of months would be under our existing code, not our proposed code. And sometimes that helps, sometimes that's not a help. Just depends. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Blackford. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Siriano?
Yeah, just a couple things. Mr. Blackford I think we're bringing our zoning code into the 21st century, so that's really good. And my comments are general. I really like the trend to simplification. Even as a professional, I can say that we struggle with reading municipalities' codes. They're already complicated enough. Love the pictures. Those are helping. I like the glossary, to kind of simplify it. I think we're trending towards for our community and for professionals that are, working in our municipality, to transparency, access, making something that's less intimidating. And ultimately what we want is clarity, so that we can minimize the amount of churn that we have and misunderstandings with people that are working here. So I think that is good. With regard to specifically on the signage that was commented on through correspondence, I don't fundamentally oppose what is in the standard that was highlighted, but I do have I'm not familiar with it overall, and I would be reticent to codify it into our zoning code only because I don't know how restrictive it is with regard to obviously it's safety first, but it seems like we'd also be committing to something that I don't know, maybe overkill or have some stipulation that may be, honestly, like not warranted. So I would just be reticent to putting that into our zoning code and letting that bear itself out through engineering and permitting. So that's my opinion. So, but overall, I'm in full support of this. It's awesome.
Thank you very much. I especially appreciate the comments about the ease of use and confusion because, like you said, whether you live this every day or not, it's a burdensome document. It's difficult to digest, and confusion doesn't benefit anyone, internal and external customers. So that's really what we're trying to do is eliminate that. So appreciate that feedback very much. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Markin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few comments, a few questions. First, I'd like to recognize the Planning Commission or the Planning Department for a job very well done, lots of years of work, and you're certainly close to the finish line here. I will say, as far as signage within private property, when I owned a business at Cherry Bottom and Morse, the shops there, shocking amount of fender benders within the parking lot. So I don't know if signage solves all that, but it was, and we did petition the landlord who did put up a stop sign over by the UDF there because there was just multiple accidents of two cars going through it at the same time and running into each other. So like I said, lots of accidents within the private property, none, just property damage. Quick minute on the hotels. I would just like some clarification. We've had some hotels approach the city over the years, certainly in my days at the Visitors Bureau, with the mayor's days at the Visitors Bureau. One of which was like behind the Giant Eagle. We got approached for a hotel there once, which I assumed that would be neighborhood commercial zoning. Now, to me, it's a lousy piece of property, and I don't know if a hotel really works in there, but somebody did toy with that. We also had a hotel approach us years ago about maybe a creekside. Hotels are important to the Visitors Bureau. They're important to the city. So, kind of.
Absolutely.
I know the mayor's very cognizant of where they go and how they do and how important they are to everybody. So we don't want to chase a hotel away.
No.
We just want to make sure they're in the right location.
Absolutely. So I'm pulling up the zoning map and I'm going to zoom in, and it may be the exact properties that you're thinking of. We're just referencing. So here's Morse Road. Here's Hamilton. This red blob is Giant Eagle. And then here in pink, you see these three lots.
Yeah.
So those three lots that's neighborhood commercial. This is, very established condominium community, residential, So we, looked at this as a neighborhood commercial area, and this is an area where we were looking at that specifically that we did not feel hotels would be appropriate. So that's one reason why, like you pointed out, it's adjacent, it's neighborhood commercial, not appropriate in this area, but say in Old Gahanna, where, that's actively something that, the city is pursuing, and that, I know there's a lot of efforts by administration, economic development to get those kind of users because of the great benefits that they provide, and that this area, it's allowed today under our current code, and it would be, no change. So Creekside, it would be allowed, in areas in red, it would be allowed as well. So I think we inadvertently added it to a zoning that hasn't historically had it. And that seemed to be a problem when we started looking at the map of where some of those properties might be located. So again, it's not to, really limit it anywhere, say, we don't want this in the city. It was, I think inadvertently it got opened up into a lot more areas than currently. And that's, we're just trying to modify that slightly.
And if a hotel would want to go into a neighborhood commercial, they could apply for a zoning change and go through the process.
Yes, absolutely. So that's 100% what it is. That's the feedback that we would provide is that you need to rezone this. Here are your options. Here's what we would recommend. From commercial general, because this is what the land use plan says and things like that. So yeah, we would provide guidance, but they would have to come through for a rezoning. Yes, sir.
And the same situation will be for automotive in an area where automotive would not be allowed in the new code.
Yes, absolutely. It applies to more than hotels. So yes, automotive is one that we've kind of refined over the years. This is taking that a step further. I know we had some challenges with some of the uses allowed in neighborhood commercial, specifically auto-related uses. So now that's a commercial general industrial area use, not a neighborhood activity.
So the last one, I guess, is just a question that popped in my head. You can educate me on this. You're going from 26 zoning classifications to 13, which means lots of properties change their zoning. Mm-hmm. I assume we don't put a sign in front of everyone and have a hearing. So how's the process change if a property or lots of properties in Gahanna now are going to switch from one zoning classification to another? Does it just happen with the city council motion?
City, when they pass this, the zoning map's part of that, so that zoning map gets adopted. So that's how those happen. Cities don't have to and really can't. I don't know how many parcels are in the city. Maddie and I went through that zoning map at least 5-6 times, and it's extensive. It's not practical. That's why there's a different set of rules for municipalities than there are for individuals who want to change one single piece of property.
So when approved by council?
It's approved. It's approved. So the good thing is that I struggle to put a percentage on it, but I would say 97% of properties, their zoning, it's going to be a different color like we saw. Like what we're calling residential on this map is yellow or ugly looking orangish brown. In those will have different names, but what's allowed, what the setbacks are, they're all very, very, very similar. But everything's changed because almost all the terminology has changed, I think, except for maybe Old Gahanna and neighborhood commercial.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Just a final couple questions. On the sign standards, I know that we've had issues with electronic signs pop up. Is that standard changing at all?
That is a great question. So one of the things that we went back and looked at some of our engagement materials and we specifically brought up signage and electronic signs during COVID when this project was getting underway, and that was something we want to look at because as some of you may or may not know, we had a BZBA meeting, electronic signs. Mm-hmm. The city's kind of changed its look. That's a very long-winded way of saying that consistently the feedback we received, the least desirable sign type out there is an electronic sign. So the community hasn't shown a desire to have electronic signs. So we are not proposing any changes to our electronic signs. So it's the same standards that we have now that would be in place. So long-winded way of saying the community didn't want any change, so we're not proposing any change.
Okay.
At least the majority of the community.
And then in the section 1113, the watershed management, would I be correct to assume that both the stormwater management and erosion sediment control standards have been reviewed and given their blessing by the engineering staff?
So yes, that's a great question. So those are holdovers from our current code, and we pretty much took what was there and put it back. But we did engage obviously with our engineering team. They had a look at it and they proposed a few minor changes. We incorporated those in. I think kind of maybe like we're talking about with reflective signage, that might be living in this code short term, and then long term it'll probably go somewhere else. But yes, we did engage with our engineering team. They were kind enough to provide us some feedback, and I would say it was really tweaking. I know we looked at it, I couldn't remember what it was, but it was probably just a few minor verbiage changes.
Very good. That's all I had. Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to follow up on a couple of things with the signage. So when you have an internal signage or a complex, we have a master sign plan that the developer produces. Does verbiage for the signage go into that language?
So, making sure,
So you have the master signage plan the developer would have for this complex. Can this verbiage for the signage for the traffic be part of that? Because I'm not in favor of making it its own individual change. I think it's an internal thing. It opens up to some kind of liability, which we don't want to get into. But as we're saying, hey, your sign has to be 14 square feet.
yes, and we
wide.
would run it by the city engineer to make sure it's consistent, but it probably is ideal living somewhere else, but planning is not involved in those that might be part of like the civil drawings that our engineering folks look at. So they didn't have an objection to the language, but it probably would be ideal if it lived somewhere else. Again, this would be all right as sort of a stopgap until that happens, but we wouldn't see Department of Planning, we're not involved in that, so we wouldn't be able to see those internal plans and make comments about this provision. It would be up to a different group to do that.
It just seemed like it could find a home there.
It could,
That
it could.
So the ADU that you were talking about being 1,000 square feet, is that all detached units? Or is that attached?
I want to look to smarter people on my left. You guys remember? I think that's detached. Yeah. So it can be attached or detached.
Can be attached?
Yes.
Definitely in favor of that. And then your comment with the conditional use that you have that Charlie brought up about the overlay, it's just a good thing, but I think we can, again, cover that through bringing it before us in conditional use, so I don't think it has to be in there to offer some direction.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it, Mr. Chair.
So one kind of final question. Have we provided enough feedback on your questions that you can?
Yes, I think so. I think the main one is the reflectivity of the signage. We can have a deeper dive with our engineering team to see what's appropriate. If it's appropriate to keep it, expand on it in the zoning code, we will do so. If not, we're not going to do that. We'll follow up, either way with Mr. Litsky about what route we go. Certainly have direction on the other items. So yes, we're good there. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve it? Is there a motion to recommend?
Okay, so seeing no other questions, do we have a motion for approval?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that item CC-0001-2024 to recommend approval to council for the repeal and replacement of Part 11 Planning and Zoning Code of the codified ordinances of the City of Gahanna be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Do I have a second?
Second to Markin.
Thank you, Mr. Tamarkin. Is there any discussion on the motion? So I just want to, again, say thank you to Mr. Blackford and his staff. I've been there and done this, writing codes before in my professional life, so I know it's a heavy lift. It's a thankless thing to do, but it's very important. So again, thank you for all your efforts. I think this is good. So, hearing that, clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes,
Shapaka,
Yes.
Suriano.
Yes.
motion passes. Okay, moving on. Any unfinished business? None? Any new business?
No, sir.
Okay, seeing none. Official reports, Assistant City Attorney,
Nothing to report at this time.
Director of Planning?
Let's see, I don't know what we have coming up. I know we have a lot of applications in review. I think as we kind of look at things, it seems to be kind of cyclical here in Gahanna, where I think the next few months we'll have some large agendas. There were some projects that were just kind of, the applicant chose to sit on them for months and months, and now everyone's coming out of the woodwork, rush, rush, rush. That happened, so I wouldn't be surprised if, say, March, April, we had some of our heavy agendas. Again, I will briefly say BZBA was last week for the St. Matt's electronic sign. I believe for the most part, they agreed with Planning Commission. I think they changed the duration around a little bit, frequency of what the message changing was. But we will see a new design or changes to the design review application that was submitted previously. So probably next month or two, you'll see a revised design review for the sign, St. Matt's sign, and I would expect it to be, meeting the 33% digital, only having the one color. The frequency, I think, was 1 hour. So largely what was Planning Commission decided. So yeah, just a quick update there. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Liaison?
I might look to Madam Mayor. I've been kind of focused on this zoning thing, so I'm a little out of touch, even more so than usual, which I'm actually pretty out of touch all the time.
Well, I will combine
That's a different
council
story.
liaison. You have been a little focused, and you've done a phenomenal job. I will just
Thank you,
note
Madam
that this past, about 2 weeks ago, the administration took to council a request for permission to bid the 825 Tech Center Drive project, which was approved. This past Monday, just 2 days ago, we sat in these chambers and presented the overall project budget. I'm not going to go through the numbers because the numbers are swimming in my head, much like Director Blackford's zoning code is swimming through his head right now. But it was a very extended conversation. We'll be continuing that dialogue as well. In addition to presenting the overall budget amount, there was obviously a presentation of the bond legislation. So that will be moving forward so that we, hopefully, looking at the time frame that we have laid out, would begin construction at 825 Tech Center Drive. April 30th is slated right now. Projected timeline with weather and all those things that can happen over the next 18 to 24 months of the projected construction time frame would put us with a projected move-in date on Christmas Day of 2025. So we've instructed staff to tell their in-laws they cannot spend the holidays with them. No, just kidding. So if we have the move-in day on Christmas Day in 2025, we're looking at moving in early 2026. What that looks like, have no idea. That's a discussion that needs to happen, but a lot of things need to happen before then. But again, I would encourage you, if you did not have an opportunity to watch the council discussion for Monday, to go back and watch that. It was very detailed with regard to the budget, and we had our representatives from MSA Design as well as Elford there, and our municipal advisor, Baker Tilly. So we talked about the financial impacts to the city, how debt service would be covered, et cetera. So great discussion, very excited about that project, but between zoning code and 825, that's what we've been focused on. So thank you.
Thank you. Next item, anything else, Madam Mayor?
State of the schools. I actually will note, right before I came here, there was the school district offered a walkthrough of the completed addition and renovations that were done to Gahanna Middle School East. I think you guys might have seen that at some point, but the building is beautiful, wide open spaces, and I recognize that it was 15 years since it was last in that building. That's how old my daughter is, my youngest daughter is. But it was a fantastic facility. Next Wednesday, they will be hosting State of the Schools. I believe that starts at 7 o'clock. That'll be held at Middle School West. And then just for your calendar purposes, Thursday, March 28th will be the State of the City. So just note that date on your calendars. We'd love for you to be there as well.
All right, thank you. I don't have anything to report. Long meeting tonight, but a good meeting, so I like it. Any correspondence and actions?
No, sir.
Poll members for comments. Mr. Packer? Mr. Pollier?
This was my first official meeting, so very interesting to just deep dive into all the subject matter here. So looking forward to future meetings.
Mr. Greenberg?
Nice first meeting, Mr. Chair. Good job.
Thank you. It's not over yet. Mrs. Soriano?
I have no additional comments. Thank you.
Mr. DeMarco?
No comments.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. We're adjourned.